Welcome to the WLPGA's LPG Talks interview series. Each interview will feature LPG industry leaders and explore current opportunities, trends and developments in the LPG industry. We hope you will enjoy these informative discussions.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I'm Michael Kelly with the World LPG Association, and you are watching LPG Talks. I'm very excited today because we're joined with Scott Foster, who is the Director of Sustainable Energy Division for UNECE, the United Nations Commission for Europe. Scott, how are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be on your show.
Well, thank you. You're kicking off our 2022 LPG Talks, and we're happy to have you here because Scott joined us in Dubai, where he gave a very powerful challenge to our industry. And we're going to get to that. But first, Scott, could you please explain to us what it is that UNECE does, and then a little bit about your background to give us some context?
Sure. Thank you very much. The United Nations Economic Commission for Europe is one of the 5 regional commissions in the UN system. We have a range of different divisions working on various topics. So my sister divisions, if you will, deal with land management, they deal with forestry, they deal with environment, trade, transportation, etc. The division that I oversee is the Sustainable Energy Division, and we work on a range of topics. I think the first important thing to realize is that the word sustainable is undefined. For some people, it's all about climate change, and we've got an existential threat that is climate change, and somehow we're going to have to address that. But on the other hand, the vast majority of people on the planet are dealing with putting a roof over their heads, food on their table, dealing with the daily challenges. So sustainability has a more development angle to it. And what we're trying to achieve in the Sustainable Energy Sub-Program is an integrated set of solutions. So we are about dealing with fossil. Fossil does represent 80% of the energy mix, but we're also about energy efficiency, we're about renewables, we're about market design. So it's quite a complex system. In terms of my own background, it's a mixed bag. I started with a utility in California that was working on a range of topics, gas and electricity generation. My own background was hydroelectric generation. I was working on the Sierra Nevada, getting licenses for operating hydro facilities. From there, I went to the International Energy Agency. I worked for Cambridge Energy Research Associates. I ended up being vice president for global regulatory affairs for a global utility. And from there, I went to being a management consultant, working with the leading energy companies worldwide, helping them to address key strategic questions. The number one question that they were asking was, how do we address climate change? How do we deal with the science of climate change? How do we deal with the politics of climate change? How do we change our portfolio of activities and assets given what's happening? One day, my wife was reading the paper and she saw an ad. She goes, "Oh my God, they put your CV in this ad." And that's what brought me to the UN.
Thank you. That's great. So from a utility to a management consultant to the United Nations has been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It has. I find the blend of utility experience with industry, particularly with CERA, we were dealing with all energy types, the management consulting side where you're dealing with what are the challenges, but also the intergovernmental side with the IEA. That's actually been a pretty effective blend that's helped me a lot in my current role.
That's interesting. And I wonder how that affects your view of the LPG industry. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, having attended Dubai and seen up close and personal our industry, what are your takeaways from that experience? And did it change your perception of who we are as an industry?
Well, I found the event in Dubai was fabulous. So I can only congratulate you on the event that you put together. Thanks go to Enoch for hosting that. It was a fabulous experience all around. My own discussions with various players in the industry were rich. I found the challenges that they were facing were quite important. But I also found an industry that felt very much under threat, with fingers pointing, bad people, bad people. My own view has been shaped by my experience, but also what we've been doing at the United Nations. Every country has got its own endowment of natural resources. They've got their own cultural, regulatory, legislative inheritance, if you will. They've come down their own path. So there's not one solution. There's not one pathway that takes you to sustainability. So it strikes me that there's not one approach that works for everybody. And as a result, I like to talk about the pathways to the future. And people tend to think that we need to go only in one direction. You find that every technology is actually going to have to play its role in the energy system of the future. And we have very uncomfortable conversations with member states. Nuclear comes to mind. Our own analysis shows that we're not going to get to 2 degrees, let alone 1.5 degrees, if you exclude nuclear power. Also, if you're thinking about that integrated solution set, if suddenly I say you have to go without technology A, B, or C, suddenly I'm disenfranchising an entire part of the population from being able to achieve their own quality of life aspirations. That doesn't work. Tell me what the definition of the word fair is. So when we look at every technology, whether it's natural gas or LPG or whatever, they've got a role to play. They've got to play their role. And it's no longer being roadkill. It's no longer being a victim of the transitions. It's actually being an active participant in that transition. Let's deliver energy for sustainable development. And that's where I see a role for the industry to play. And that was a very positive takeaway. Doesn't mean that climate change is not the existential threat that we face. We absolutely have got to find a way to decarbonize the energy system, but simply pointing our fingers and blaming isn't the way to do it.
Wow, well said. And I want to build on what you were just, the statement that you just made, because in Dubai, the statement I heard repeated from what you said over and over again by numerous people is this concept that LPG is not just a transition fuel, but it's also a destination fuel, or it's a destination fuel as well. And I think for those of us in the fossil fuel industry that, as you said, are used to being attacked and that feel a bit under siege, to hear that framing of our role in the energy transition was enlightening. Can you build on that? Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, I will. There's a view, and I like to use the expression standing on the shoulders of giants. And that's obviously Newton talking about him being able to make all of these advances based on what happened before. Likewise, with the energy transition, you can deal with the giant as somehow this big obstacle on the road that you have to get through, past, or remove. You can also deal with the giant as somebody whose technology, whose capital, whose management skills can facilitate the transformation. So if I look at gas more broadly, not just LPG, but the natural gas industry, and you think about the vast infrastructure that's in place to produce, transport, deliver, and then use gas products, to simply snap your finger like Thanos and say this doesn't exist anymore isn't possible. It's not economically efficient. It's not socially efficient. There's a range of challenges with that. So if I look at the industry and I say I've got to deal with methane emissions, and that's a fantastic way of dealing with a major source of greenhouse gases. If I can actually enhance the sustainability credentials of gas products by addressing methane, that would be hugely important. If I can then use the existing infrastructure to bring renewable gases or decarbonized gases. Maybe it's hydrogen, maybe it's renewably produced methane, maybe it's another product. There's an opportunity for innovation, but it's innovation that doesn't turn its back on communities. It's an innovation that actually brings communities along for the ride. So I want to think about the social possibilities. I want to think about the economic possibilities of using existing infrastructure. And I want to use the skills and talents of the industry. We've got to get to our destination. And we're not going to do it, as you say, by creating victims.
Thank you. I mean, this ties into some of the work that we're doing with renewable LPG as well, where the industry is investing a significant amount of money. And I like the gratuitous Thanos reference as well. Everyone likes that reference to Thanos. Let me get one final question. And you sort of touched on it on the discussion that we just had. Do you have any advice for your industry, or what would be your advice for the industry on how it should be positioning itself in this decarbonization discussion, which is just going to gather speed following COP26?
I find that a lot of the resistance to transformations is the sense of loss, the sense that we are going to suffer because of this transformation. This is a threat. This is negative. And the minute you have that idea, then communities and industries are going to get entrenched and they're going to resist the change. When you paint it as an opportunity, then suddenly the perceptions shift. I think I made reference to this in Dubai, but if I didn't, here I go. I like to refer to images of four well-known Americans. The first one that comes to mind is Ronald Reagan, when he's there saying, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." And the theme I like to build on is this has to be a collaborative. We need a rules-based trading infrastructure that allows opportunity to happen, not putting up barriers to trade. So if we're going to start thinking about putting in trading rules that prevent transactions, that prevent goods from moving based on their carbon content, for example, that is a barrier to trade approach that I find risky. Doesn't mean it won't work, but we have to be careful on how we implement something like that. The second one is JFK, when he says, "Don't ask what the UN can do for you, ask what you can do for the UN." Obviously, I'm perverting the quote. But the idea is that we want everybody to be collaborating and working together. If we can come up with acceptable common ground for standards, for normative instruments, that includes what pathway we want to take to decarbonize, what pathway we want to take to deliver on quality of life, that would be a major step forward.
Yeah.
The third one then is Barack Obama, who is all about yes, we can. And I extend that to yes, we have to because of the existential threat. Yes, we will. We have the technology today. We have the know-how. We don't need to create something brand new. We can deliver this. As I mentioned about methane management earlier, but I could also talk about the built environment. There's so much progress that we could make to reduce wasted energy, to really deliver efficiently on a range of outcomes. The final one then is Gordon Gekko. And everybody says, well, wait a minute, Reagan, Obama, JFK, then who? Gordon Gekko. And he's well known from the movie Wall Street. And his theme was greed is good, which is obviously a bad thing to say. The point of that image is that everyone, every individual, every community, every nation is going to be acting in what they perceive as their own self-interest. Our challenge is getting alignment between what they perceive as their self-interest and what society requires. And this is where I think it's critically important for us to look at the opportunities that exist. The LPG industry is delivering important dimensions of quality of life in parts around the world. It's in mobility, it's in hard to get to regions. It has that role that it is playing today. that role will still need to be filled in the future. The industry can reinvent itself with innovation to continue playing that role. And I do believe that sincerely.
Wow, fantastic. JFK, Ronald Reagan, Barack Obama, Gordon Gekko, and Scott Foster, ladies and gentlemen. Scott, thank you so much for being with us. Again, this is Scott Foster. He is the Director of Sustainable Energy Division for the UNECE in Geneva and a good friend of the LPG industry. Scott, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. You're watching LPG Talks. I'm Michael Kelly, and I'll see you next time.